Hi, this is the Bible Ranger talking about how did it all begin, and I'm talking about the secret societies, Illuminatis, the mystery religions, and the New World Order. The reason for this particular lesson is because when you start talking about people that control the world, people start going into this conspiracy theory mindset. So if you know more about it, how it started and how the Bible is integrated with it, you can accept it easier and really understand it. Again, so it began with Lucifer. He was, made by God. He became Satan when he was kicked out of heaven. And once that happened, obviously he's gonna be pretty upset. So Satan plans to get back at God through his creation, mankind. So he tempted Eve. Eve was tricked into the forbidden fruit, not an apple, but the forbidden fruit. We don't know what it was. Satan's anger was God, to Eve, that God's keeping knowledge from her. So obviously, she became curious, the fruit looked good to her, and she ate from it. And then soon after that, Adam fell too, and Satan won the first battle. God had a plan, and Satan knew about this plan. It was to redeem mankind from his sins. So in Genesis 3:15, what basically is the first prophecy of the coming of the Messiah. And God is talking to Satan through the serpent, and God says to the serpent that you will bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. So Satan's like, okay, now I know your plan. I'm going to come up with one too. Satan tried to ruin God's plan by breeding the fallen angels and the human females. So Satan's goal was to contaminate the bloodline, which would have been blood that was sin, and then the Messiah could not have come. They created hybrids. And these hybrids, in Genesis chapter 6:4, what they call them mighty men of old. And I believe a lot of the legends came from here. And that will be very interesting. We'll talk about that in the near future. This was Satan's way of contaminating the gene pool. If you have the gene pool contaminated, that would ruin the prophecy of the Messiah from coming. And like I said, we'll be talking about this shortly. Now, the earth was flooded because Satan nearly succeeded in contaminating the whole world except Noah and his family. They were Noah is considered pure, and the Bible talks about that. And it talks about pure as in not contaminated. Now God destroyed the earth by water, but saved Noah and his family in the ark. Now this subject here is also fascinating, and we'll be talking about this in the near future. Enter Nimrod. Hundreds of years after the flood, in Genesis 10:8-12, it basically says a mighty hunter before the Lord. And it's talking about Nimrod. Nimrod in Hebrew means let us rebel. Mighty is used a few different ways in the Bible. Like in Daniel chapter 11, it talks about mighty king. In Judges chapter 6, it talks about the mighty warrior. In Isaiah chapter 3, it talks about mighty military. And in Psalms 52, it talks about a person being proud tyrant. Now, though Nimrod fits all these here, the commentaries push us to believe that Nimrod was basically a tyrant. Now, Nimrod and Semiramis. Nimrod was associated with fire. He must have used it in battle. He probably was the first king, for sure, after the flood. After one of his battles, he met Semiramis in a brothel. Nimrod's subjects were told that Semiramis was a queen virgin from the sea. I mean, who's going to have a prostitute for a queen, right? So that's the story they came up with. Now, the tower. Now, let me read straight from the Bible using the NET. Genesis 11:4. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens so that we may make our name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered across the face of the earth. What's wrong with that? Well, when God made the earth, he wanted mankind to fill it in Genesis chapter 1 and in Isaiah chapter 45. But these people don't want to go anyplace. So building the Tower of Babel was a rebellious act. Now typically, let me get my marker here. Typically, here behind this Nimrod, it's a spiral type tower. That's the way I grew up looking at it. But through times and in archaeological work, they discovered many of these ziggurats. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but there's like a step pyramid, and they found these to be around the area. So most likely, the Tower of Babel looked like this. In Ezekiel 28:14, the Bible mentions the mountain of God. When Satan was Lucifer, he saw it. He was there. He knew what God's throne was, and he probably wanted a kingdom like that, like God. So the ziggurat was the closest thing he can come to it. Here's where the mystery religion started. Nimrod and Semiramis discovered that if they had religious authority or control, they would have temporal control or authority, like earthly type control. So using religion as a control was a very powerful tool for them. Satan, we know that he's the father of liars. In Satan's mystery religion, it twists the story of the gospel in the stars. Yes, the gospel was in the stars. That was the original intent. He turned it into horoscope teaching and astrology teaching. It has nothing to do with the Bible. And we will talk about that in a future episode. Now, they also came up with polytheism, the belief and worship of more than one God. Also, this was the origin of the all-seeing eye. Now, what does all these symbols have to do with Semiramis and Nimrod? Well, you remember that in the Tower of Babel, God confused their languages. So they came up with an idea, a master scheme, that if God ever does that again, we can always recognize what we believe by the symbols. And that's how these symbols came to be. Possibly the actual Tower of Babel had a Stargate in it. Commentaries say this. That's hard to prove, so I just wanted to mention it. World influence. Even though God destroyed the tower and confused their languages, the city of Babylon still influenced the world. As a root of all the false religions, they branch from here. Remember, by one word of God's mouth, the destruction of the tower, God slows Satan's progress over 4,000 years. Never think that Satan is actually, equal or can spar with God. God just lets him do whatever he's going to do for his purpose. Nimrod became the sun god, the light, and Semiramis became the moon goddess, the darkness. The God plot. Nimrod was killed and dismembered. Semiramis was illegitimately pregnant. So Nimrod became the sun god, and Nimrod's sun rays impregnated Semiramis. That was the story. She had Tammuz, and Tammuz was actually the reincarnation of Nimrod. And that would sometimes you'll see later on that they actually mix Nimrod and Tammuz up because he's actually Nimrod, according to them. After 102 years, the reign of Semiramis, she died. And after her death, she was sent back by the gods as a fertility goddess. She landed on the Nile and changed a bird into an egg-laying rabbit. Does that sound familiar? Same people, different names. Through hundreds of years, many names were given to Nimrod and Semiramis and Tammuz. Some of the names were changed because of different cultures, and sometimes they were named after a particular characteristic of that god. Like Nimrod, he became the sun god. Marduk, Enki, Nebu, Bel, Baal, or Baal, which means Lord, and many more. For example, these are ways that were used. Later on, we'll hear about this king named Nebuchadnezzar. You notice that was part of Nimrod's name. And you've heard of Belshazzar, which was one of the fellow brothers, not brothers, but one of the fellow mates of Daniel in the fire. And Beelzebub. And Beelzebub is considered sometimes Satan himself or the second in command. But if you notice, these names are part of Nimrod's other names. Well, Tammuz is Nimrod reincarnated. So you will see commentaries addressing him as a husband/son of Semiramis. And sometimes that can be confusing. Now, Tammuz is mentioned in the Bible in Ezekiel chapter 8:14. And if you notice, that looks pretty close to Mary and Jesus. There's nothing wrong with pictures of Mary and Jesus, okay? But when it has other symbols from Babylon, like these stars around her head and these hearts, it's really a copy of Semiramis. Other names for Semiramis: the Queen of Heaven, Isis, that would be Isis and Diana would be in Egypt, the Virgin Mother, Venus, I believe that was Greek or Roman, I don't remember, Ishtar, which is really Easter, Astarte, Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth actually is mentioned in the Bible. This one right there. Sorry about that. And the Mother of God, Cybele, which we'll be talking about that in a second. Cybele, and the Moon Goddess, and many, many more. Now in Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 18, it actually says the Queen of Heaven, and they are talking about Semiramis. And these are other pictures. And this one here, it was when she died, she came back as fertility. As you see, she has many breasts here, representing fertility. And these would be from Egypt, of course. And here's the moon goddess. And these are from other different cultures. Now, practices that endured. In Leviticus 18 and Jeremiah 32, God warns his people in the Bible that sacrificing their children to Moloch. It sounds disgusting, doesn't it? These priests of Baal, or Canaan Baal, basically cannibals, they come from the Chaldeans, okay? They would eat the flesh of sacrificed baby remains. It's disgusting, but demonic activity is disgusting. The secret mystery religion is filled with sex and symbols. Some priests then practice celibacy, at least in pretense, from the goddess Cybele, which is really another name for Semiramis. She is all over the place, in all different kinds of cultures. Now, the coming of part 2, there was too much to give all in one lesson here, so I'm going to continue this in another part. We covered 2,500 years. The next lesson will jump forward 1,400 years and then take it to the present. Always remember that we win at the end. And this is the Bible Ranger, making the Bible simple, but yet rich in content. And please subscribe, share, and give us a thumbs up. Thank you very much. Until next time.